Thanks for joining. This is our fourth and final lecture in module topic 2. Last time, as you know, we discussed a lot. That was a really important lecture on comparative advantage. And we learned that, we knew first of all that trade was important, that trade creates win-win exchanges, that trade makes people better off, okay? Last time, we discussed the theory of comparative advantage, which we defined as the ability to produce something at a lower opportunity cost. And we came away with several really big conclusions. Conclusion number 1 is once you determine a comparative advantage, you should specialize in that area. And that specialization, that division of labor, gets you even better at that. And then the extension of that is, as long as you have property rights and good institutions and good functioning markets, everybody can be better off at the collective aggregated level if we trade. So we have this chain of thinking. We have comparative advantage based on lowest opportunity cost. We specialize in those things in which we have the CA. We get really, really good and productive at that. And then we trade with other people who are productive and good at what they do. You probably have never thought about this, but that's what your future is going to be. You know, you're not going to be self-sufficient. You're going to do a really, really niche type of work, hopefully get really good at it, make a lot of money doing it, and then that money is what you will use to buy goods and services from other people who specialize in their things. When you look at that, you see that a modern economy, besides being pretty remarkable, is really an intricate web, an intricate mesh of millions and millions of people who don't even know each other, but who are connected by trade. And that's a remarkable thing to think about because it goes back to another big idea. That big idea being that the pursuit of an individual's own self-interest can actually align with the self-interest of other people and lead to overall societal gains. You know, it's an amazing thing to think about, that the pursuit of your own self-interest can make society better off. Yet trade does that. It's part of its power. It's why it's so important to economists. Today, what I'm going to do is give you just a real quick couple of minutes to take this idea of trade and to take a look at it at the global economy level. Now, to be really, really clear, most economists don't really differentiate between trade at a local level and international trade. You know, some really, really hardcore economists even reject the term international trade because they say there's no such thing as international trade. There's just trade, and the borders tend to be artificial. You know, saying that there's international trade, they would say, makes as much sense as saying that there's, you know, trade between LA County and Orange County, or between California and Nevada, okay? But those objections aside, I want to take the knowledge that we gained in our last lecture and just do a little quick extension and take the trade discussion to the global level. I want to do this so that you have a bit of a background in globalization and that you have a good set of jargon and terms and understanding to make sense of some of the stuff that you hear in the economic and political debate sphere these days too, okay? So we're going to call this section Trade and the Global Economy. Let's first start with the definition of globalization. Globalization can be defined as an opening of markets to foreign trade and foreign financial investment, okay? Globalization at its core is simply trade done at an international global level. Globalization, again, is the opening, or we'll say the opening up of markets to both foreign trade and foreign financial investment, thus increasing the interconnectivity of economic transactions across borders. And we should default to the idea, and there's some caveats later, but we should default to the idea that if trade between you and a neighbor is good, and if trade between me and Del Taco is good, that those same gains from trade should be expected to apply at the broader globalized level, okay? A couple of definitions. Number one, exports are goods that are produced here domestically, but sold in a foreign country. Okay? Exports made at home, sold abroad. Imports, on the other hand, are the goods and services that are produced in a foreign country, but are sold here at home domestically. Okay, so again, exports made here, sent out. Imports, sorry about that, imports made there, brought in. Okay, the difference between a country's export and import levels is its net export, which is also known as its trade balance. Net exports or trade balance is the difference between exports minus imports. Okay? A country will face a trade deficit anytime they import more than they export. In other words, when your net exports are less than zero, when you're importing more than you're sending out, you face what's known as a trade deficit. On the other hand, a trade surplus occurs when a nation exports more than it imports. A trade surplus occurs when a nation exports more than it imports. In other words, you have a trade surplus when your net exports are greater than zero, okay? Now, that's a basic definition of exports and imports. It's just putting terms to the ideas of trade that's now just been expanded globally, okay? Now, one thing that makes international trade a little bit more wonky than just regular domestic trade is that international trade typically involves multiple currencies. You typically have to do currency exchanges when you're trading with a partner who has a different currency than you do, okay? So currencies are exchanged in currency markets. We haven't talked about those before. We talked about resource markets and product markets, but there's also currency markets. And a currency market is simply where the buyers and sellers of currency come together. Now, I know it's a tricky thing to think about because you think, I understand trading dollars for Del Taco. A currency market is where you're trading dollars for euros or pesos or yen, okay? You're still buying an item, you're just buying money. It's hard to get your head around, I know it, so chew on the terms a little bit, okay? But know that international trade involves multiple currencies. Those currencies are exchanged in currency markets. The exchange rate, which you can get at any major financial website, the exchange rate is the rate at which one currency can be converted to another currency. So the dollar euro, you're going to do a study abroad to Italy, okay? You need euros. The dollar euro exchange rate is how many euros can you buy with your given dollars? Or seen a different way, what is the buying power of the dollar relative to the euro? That's all it is. You're just buying a product, a different currency, okay? So exchange rates are the rates at which one country's currency can purchase another country's currency. And again, you have to convert currencies when you're going to buy a foreign country's goods because they typically want it in their own currency, not in dollars, okay? Now, with that said, much like the price of nachos and gasoline and LMU tuition can fluctuate, the value of a currency can also fluctuate. We call these currency appreciation and currency depreciation, okay? Let's talk about these real quick. Get a definition. Currency appreciation, meaning it goes up, is an adjustment in the exchange rate that makes one country's currency more valuable relative to another country's currency, okay? So when the dollar appreciates compared to the euro, for example, the dollar becomes more valuable relative to the euro. Seen a different way, the dollar can buy more euros. The euro can buy fewer dollars, okay? This makes a country's currency more valuable compared to another country's currency. The takeaway from this is currency appreciation makes the goods and services produced in that particular country more costly to the rest of the world. If the dollar appreciates, that means that foreigners can buy fewer dollars with their money. That means that the goods that are produced here in America become relatively more expensive to foreigners, which is going to go back and affect the import and export levels and therefore the trade deficit. Okay? Currency depreciation is the other way. When a currency depreciates, goes down, that is an adjustment in the exchange rate that makes a country's currency less valuable relative to another country's currency. This makes the goods and services produced in the country more affordable. To the rest of the world because its currency is now less expensive. If the dollar depreciates against the euro, for example, that means that the dollar is less valuable. A dollar buys fewer euros, but seen a different way, that makes the euro stronger to the dollar and the euro buys more dollars. Since the euro can buy more dollars, the euro can buy more dollar-denominated goods and services. So when a country's currency depreciates, that makes the goods produced in that country more affordable to the rest of the world because the currency is now less expensive. And when you do the conversions, you can buy more things. Notice that a depreciation of a currency, again, by making some goods less expensive, will affect the import and export trade balances, okay? This is really advanced stuff. Money and banking is a pretty advanced topic in economics, but I wanted to put these things on your radar to expose you to them, and so that you can get a sense of when you hear terms, currency appreciation, currency exchange, they call it Forex, F-O-R-E-X, foreign exchange. You can put those concepts in the context of simple trade. It's just instead of trading across a state line or trading across a county line, we're trading across a national country line. That's all, okay? With that said, let's take two final questions and wrap it up. The first thing is, since we know that specialization is good, and we know that it can help countries grow, why are some countries so slow to specialize? This is a question that, as you can imagine, is big, big, big in the minds of developmental economists who always want to understand why economic growth occurs or doesn't. Like many things in development economics, there's controversial views. They're not all equally agreed upon, but some of the things that can account, they say, for why some countries are slow to specialize would include things like population density. Countries that do not have a large population are going to have trouble kind of kickstarting and jump-starting that initial specialization because there's the fear that there's nobody else to make the things that they're giving up on making. So you have some population density questions. There can also be demographic factors, as always, that come into play. There's a lot of different things. There's also the idea that a country that is slow to specialize will always stay behind. We said earlier that trade allows for specialization, and that allows for large-scale production and the driving down of average costs. Well, you can imagine that a country that is slow to specialize will never get that head start. You know, this is one of the reasons, for example, why many poor countries in sub-Saharan Africa still struggle. Now, there's lots of other reasons, but one of them is because they've never been able to break an economy of scale threshold, they've never been able to invest in large-scale productive capacity. So they've stayed small, which keeps population density low, which keeps production low, which keeps specialization low, and you get this vicious cycle that drags an economy down, okay? The final question, and this is really more of a political one. I've been telling you now for a couple of lectures, you'll hear it in all of your econ books that trade is good, that trade's a win-win, that these borders are sort of kind of, to an economist, kind of arbitrary, right? Yet it leads to a bit of a paradox. As we look in the real world, we see that people sometimes don't like trade. You know, as an example, if trade between nations is so beneficial, why are so many people opposed to free trade agreements? NAFTA stands for the North American Free Trade Act. NAFTA was a bill passed a couple of decades ago that basically opened up, it liberalized trade between Canada, the US, and Mexico, between North America. It demolished lots of tariffs and lots of transaction costs across borders. Clearly, economists supported this. They said that NAFTA is going to be good. It's going to lead to more specialization, to growth, growth, growth. Yet NAFTA really was controversial. And to understand that, there's a few different things you have to keep in mind. Number one, we have to bear in mind that when we've been talking about the win-wins of trade, the win-wins are at the aggregate level, at the national, the big level. But just because there's an overall net win at the aggregate level does not mean that everybody does well. In fact, in any specialization, in any kind of trade, there's the potential for some people to lose out. I mean, imagine, for example, that before NAFTA, you worked in auto manufacturing. You had a stable job, you had a stable skill set, you had union protections, you had a good income. As soon as NAFTA theoretically sent a lot of auto manufacturing jobs out of America and, let's say, to Mexico, your job might have been lost. The reality is that for all the benefits, free trade agreements will oftentimes hurt some parts of society. This is especially true today when trade benefits the more productive workers, but can really hurt low-skilled, low-paid workers. Okay, so it's important to remember in economic thinking that we're always looking at the overall impact of something. You know, to an economist, if the net gains from trade are going to be high, then we should trade. But your job as a good economic thinker and as a good citizen is to say, well, is everybody going to trade? And who's going to be hurt? And what kinds of things can we do to help protect those people who are going to be hurt? You know, this is one of the reasons why economics, I told you before, is one of the most critical things you're going to study. But economics by itself, economics in a vacuum, isn't as powerful. You need other disciplines. You need ethics. You need theology. You need philosophy. You need psychology and anthropology. Because economics is a powerful tool. But sometimes people can still get hurt. Economics isn't necessarily equipped to deal with those things. I mean, economics oftentimes lacks the refinement to think about ways to handle workers whose jobs are lost. That's where other disciplines can come in. And that's where your challenge as an undergraduate studying this is to broaden your mind and think across disciplines so that you can do what's best, not just for the aggregate whole economy, but for the individual sectors within it. Okay? With that said, my friends, we are now done with module number 2. You now understand the circular flow and the PPF. You understand that the PPF curve leads to opportunity costs, and you now know that opportunity costs are the key to specialization and the theory of trade. We have proven that trade at both the domestic and the international level creates win-wins, that it's overall a net good. Therefore, we believe in providing for trade, for promoting trade, for strengthening institutions that facilitate trade. And we're also in economics very, very leery about any institution that tries to restrict trade. You now also know how to take that trade and take it to the international level with some of the key jargon and terms about imports and exports and currency movements. And finally, I hope I've planted a seed to get you thinking that at the end of the day, economics is about making people's lives better. And while the economic way of thinking has to look at the big picture of the whole economy, of the whole system, you can't be a good citizen if you let people fall between the cracks. And that's one of the challenges of modern economics, is finding those balances between the needs of the few and the gains of the many. Chew on that for a while, think about it, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for your time and your attention. You're now done with Module 2. Congratulations. We'll start up again next time with our third module. Take care. Bye.